Ambassador Eduard Habsburg, welcome back to Cultural Debris.
Thank you. It's been a while. I'm very much looking forward.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you back. You are coming to us all the way from Rome. How are things in Rome right now?
Less hot than they were in summer. We had a scorching summer, but now it's getting a bit cooler. You can go out and run in the morning actually without being totally exhausted. So yeah, it's a nice, I wouldn't say autumn because in Rome we're still a far way from autumn, but it's nice. And the work is heating up again. You know, us ambassadors, September is still halfway calm. October is going to hit us hard with events. And then it gets harder and harder until Christmas.
Well, my understanding of the schedule of life in Italy is that August tends to be a little slower, and I suppose after August things begin to pick back up for the fall. And as you mentioned, October is probably everybody is in full gear.
Yes, we're nearly there. So it's really August is dead. September is they're slowly getting up again, but August, serious business.
Right.
Sorry, October, serious business.
Yes, right. And the holidays are not far away. So
Yeah.
So that is on the horizon. Well, you are joining me today because you have another book coming out from Sophia Institute Press.
Yes, I have.
Now,
in fact,
I have a copy of the last one, The Habsburg Way. I only have a PDF of the new one because I don't think the hard copies have filtered into circulation yet.
If you look behind me, you see the cover of the new book.
Well placed.
It's called Building a Wholesome Family in a Broken World.
Mm-hmm.
And it's and if you look at the colors, it's the Habsburg family colors. And if you look closely at the cover, you will see in black and white in the background, and it's the family of Otto Habsburg and his children when they were all much younger, because he's our great example. And so while the first book was mostly a book about Habsburg family history, and also about our 7 core values, the second book is really my starter set for a good marriage. It's what you could give young couples or young people who are discerning, or people who want to get engaged, or couples with children. It's my experiences from my married life, peppered with examples from Habsburg family history on how to find the right spouse, when to get engaged, how many children to have, and which values to pass on to the next generation. So it's a Habsburg self-help book again, but one about marriage and children.
You're slowly, through these releases, you're slowly guiding all of us into how we can be good Habsburgs, I think.
Yes, I mean, in the end, the only way to do all of this perfectly is to get married to a Habsburg or get adopted by a Habsburg. But
well, there are quite a few of you, so
second best, as there are not so many around us from our side. Second best is try to live these values in everyday life.
Well, absolutely. So you have at the beginning of the book another history, a brief history of the Habsburg family. So for those who may not be familiar with you, or may not have taken the time yet to watch or listen to our first interview, I'm sure they will go back and do that.
Yes. Tell
me about your branch of the Habsburg family, and how it differentiates from some of the others, perhaps.
Well, to make a short summary of the Habsburg family history before I get to my branch, because my branch only pops into being in around the year 1800. So the Habsburgs are from a tiny, obscure corner between France, Germany, and Switzerland, near Lake Constance, near the Bodensee. And in 1273, our first family member became king of the Holy Roman Empire, Rudolf. And then somewhere around the year 1500, the Habsburgs really exploded all over European and world history by becoming the rulers in Austria, in Bohemia, Hungary, what you would now call Netherlands and Belgium, Spain, and the rest of the world in very few years. Then you had two branches of the Habsburg family, the famous Spanish branch. That was the time when you had all those Habsburg jaws that many people on Twitter love to post whenever I say something funny. And then the Habsburg Spanish line died out in around 1700. And then the Austrian line nearly died out, but survived thanks to the proliferous childbearing of Empress Maria Theresia in the 1740s and 50s. And she had 16 children in 20 years of marriage. And then the Habsburgs were back in the game. And one of her grandchildren, Archduke Joseph, was sent to Hungary. And he founded what was later to be known as the Hungarian branch of the Habsburgs. There is a Vienna branch, there is a Tuscany branch, and there is a so-called Teschen branch. And we are today about 400. We have a WhatsApp group, and our Hungarian branch also has a WhatsApp group. Very lively. We've got cousins everywhere. And so that's basically the family experience. Habsburg
sorry, go ahead.
No, I say Habsburg is a word that is it's equivalent with family.
I had the good fortune of being in Vienna back in the spring, first time visiting Vienna, and went to the Habsburg crypt and toured it, and it is very moving. It is extraordinarily beautiful. I was not quite prepared for how I guess overwhelming it is. It's really quite impressive.
Yes, it is. It definitely is. Of course, in my family, the favorite joke 30 years ago when I was a student was to park your car in front of the Habsburg crypt, the Kapuzinergruft, and then put a little paper under your wiper with the words, "Am in the crypt, will be back soon, Habsburg." I really think, funnily enough, it's a place where you can experience some of the Habsburg family feelings, because there's just so many people standing in their coffins all over that basement of the Kapuzinergruft. The most impressive thing is something that nobody ever gets to see. They only get to see one side of it, and it's something that I would recommend to everybody who goes to visit the Kapuzinergruft, but it won't be easy. It's when you come to the central and most visible of all the coffins, it's the one of Maria Theresia and her husband, Franz of Lorraine, and they are on top. You can just looking up, you can see them lying side by side on their elbows, obviously in their bed, looking at each other lovingly. And I remember that one day I was there incognito and was listening to a tour guide explaining to people and saying, yes, they're not represented as dead, but like living people, because at that time people still believed that when you die, you continue living by going to heaven. And I wanted to grab her and say, speak for yourself. But what I wanted to say mostly is that there is a possibility to view that coffin from above, and that is if you have good relations with the Capuchin monks and they can let you in above the Kapuzinergruft in the main level. There is a window looking down onto that beautiful tomb. And then you see that they are both lying on a bed, their bed cover slightly pushed aside by their legs. She's wearing pantoufles, and they're obviously lying in the bed looking at each other and having a great time. And that is such a touching thing, because you realize they loved each other very much. It was a marriage of love. They had 16 children in 20 years of marriage. And this whole crypt speaks of a family with many children. And that always impressed me strongly, because in many other kingdoms you have 2 children, 3 children, sometimes 1 child. With the Habsburgs, it's usually 8, 12, something like that, sometimes 16. That was something that I always had in front of my eyes all my life when thinking about my family. And now I look at the world around us and I see that nobody has big families. In Europe, I live in Italy, and I might have told that story when we spoke about my last book. But I became an ambassador in Rome, and I like to drive around on my own. And after 3 or 4 years, I stopped at a zebra crossing, and a beautiful pregnant Italian woman crossed the zebra crossing. And I said, "Oh, how nice, a woman who's expecting a baby." And then I thought for a second, and I realized I've been driving for 3 years and I've never seen a pregnant woman crossing the road. That is the reality of Europe nowadays, at least of Italy, which used to be what the Habsburgs were in family. Italy used to be in Europe. It was the country of children, and it's not anymore. Everybody has 1.5 children because it's too risky, it's too hard, cannot afford.
Well, and that I actually had something jotted down about that very idea. You are writing this book during a time not only when families are on decline, but most especially we see declining birth rates. That the West, Europe, the U.S., but even in the more developed East as well, we are seeing just plummeting birth rates to where they're below replacement levels. Population is declining. And to me, that is indicative of a society and a culture that doesn't have self-confidence, that doesn't have a real view of the future. What is it that we are lacking that we need again, and that perhaps your book points us to?
You see, Alan, I've been thinking a lot about that. What has happened? Because what I'm writing in my book is what you call in German Binsenwahrheiten. Binsenweisheit is something everybody should know. This is something I write about values that were totally normal for the last, I say 2,000 years. I also say 10,000 years. Every family wanted to have children, lots of children. The greatest thing for a woman was to be a mother and have children. So I think what has happened is a combination of things. I think that somewhere in the 60s, with contraception suddenly being available, and that being coupled with the idea that the only way for a woman to prove herself is to have a job and be good at it and excel and earn lots of money. These two things together, and I think led to the idea that if you're at home and have children, you're a loser. I remember when we got married, my wife and me, and we had our first child, and she told me, you know that I didn't even dare of thinking about the possibility that I could have a vocation of having children and being at home, because it was so much frowned upon that a woman even thinks about that. Like Simone de Beauvoir used to say, we can't leave women the choice, because they are weak, they would decide to be at home and not work. So what I'm saying is a very, very strong change has come onto Europe. I think most people nowadays wouldn't see what you said, a continent that doesn't have confidence in the future and they don't know who they are. I think they would say we're finally free from the shackles of childbirth, finally free from economic dependence on man. Women are finally free. But what happens then is that they usually push back having children as far as possible. You first have to have a job. And it's also reasonable, because if 2 people work and 2 people earn, you can perhaps afford to have children. So it's a reasonable thing to do, to wait, don't have children. Also enjoy each other. That's something you hear very often also from Catholic pastors. Don't go in too fast. Take your time, get to know each other and all that. And so the years go in because it's always very cozy. And the longer you wait, the more frightening the idea gets to change your life totally by having children. And then suddenly at 37, 38, many women think, now I still want to have the experience of children. And then they try, and then it doesn't work. It doesn't work because you did contraception for a long time, because your body has to adjust to something new. Or perhaps it's just not that easy when you're that old. And then you get into the terrible circle of artificial insemination, IVF, and all these things. It's terrible. Well, the way it used to be, and also the way our Catholic Church teaches us, is marital relations, sexuality should be open for life. That's what we believe as Catholics. So the moment you get married and you decide to have a marital relations, you should be open for life. And it's so ridiculous because and that's one of the reasons I wrote this book. I want to encourage people. I have 6 children. In Europe, if I tell people I have 6 children, they think I'm crazy. When I go into Catholic circles in the States, they look at you with a bit of pity because they usually have 7, 8, or 9 children. At least those Catholics I got to know in the last 2 or 3 years, I always feel slightly embarrassed for only having 6 children. I'm kidding. But I want to give my experience as someone who has 6 children and who says it's the greatest decision we made. And we didn't do it at the beginning. We didn't sort of got married and says we want to have 7 children. We played it by ear. We always asked God, is there room in our hearts and in our house? And he always said yes. So we look back and say, it was the greatest decision of my life. If I wouldn't have made that decision, I wouldn't be the happy man I am today, and my wife wouldn't be the happy woman. It's good for our relationship as a couple. It's the greatest gift you can give to your children, and it's the greatest gift you can give to society. A society is a better place if you have many children. But to have many children, you have to begin early. And I just think people totally got the thing backwards. It's the children that will enrich your life. It's not your riches that it will enable you to have children.
Yeah, I think that whenever you talk to someone, regardless of how many children they have, you never really run into somebody who goes, I really just had too many. If I had only had 1 or 2 less, then my life would have been better. No one looks back, and perhaps some people are in situations where the circumstances of them having children was something that wasn't positive. But the fruit of that itself, people are always overjoyed. They couldn't imagine trading having a child for not, and they know that there would be something missing in their life.
Yes, but of course, one of the points in my book I make is that to get married, you have to do this totally differently than the entire world around you does it. Because what's the reality nowadays? The reality is you get into the relationship game in school usually already. Many already have their first intimate relationships in school, but knowing that this is just to find out, to experience, to have adventures. And there are even some parents who say, oh, they're young, they should have fun. These people really ought to be slapped around. That's impossible. And then you have another intimate relationship and another, and you break one off and you begin a new one. And my theory is that with each of these relationships, your chance for a lifelong, fulfilling, happy marriage is getting smaller and smaller. And then usually at some point, very cynically speaking, the woman manages to keep the man so long that he finally agrees to getting married because she wants a nice little celebration in white. And usually after that, very often relationships go apart because then suddenly things get serious. And I say, no, that's not the way to do it. Don't have intimate relationships before your marriage. To use that ugly word, be chaste, and put everything on red. Put all your money on that one lifelong happy relationship, and you will be happy for life. The other thing isn't, but that sounds so crazy. But it was what everybody knew for the last thousands of years. And now it sounds like, are you absolutely out of your mind? It's impossible. It's like the young people have to have sex with 27 people. You can't help it. It's just the way it is. It isn't. You're a free human being. You're not an animal. And it's so crazy that I have to write a book about these things that everybody should know. And that also everybody who has a family and children, if you experience family life at home with many children, with a numerous family, many of these things that I had to write into my book come to you automatically. You realize you're not the center of the world. You realize that you're not entitled to every kind of entertainment and luxury. You realize that you have to look after others. You see your parents. You see a loving couple that still loves each other after decades of marriage, that are still into each other. I'm still into my wife, very much so. And we'll be 30 years married next year. And all of that you see in everyday life, and you say, I want to have that. I want to have a big family. And it pays off not to enter that dating game so strongly, but to aim for that one shot that will make you happy for life, with God's help. So growing up in a big family already gives you a lot of elements. I can tell it now with my children. My wife and I are lucky enough to have children who are blessed that they have the faith. My daughter, when she got married, she didn't have all sort of relationships before that. And her husband is devout. They pray together. That's one of the first things I say in my book. Find someone who shares your faith, ideally Catholic. I don't know how you do it outside of the Catholic Church, so I tell everybody, marry a Catholic and become a Catholic, because the Catholic Church gives you the best set of rules and the best tools to get through decades of this life together. And so what I'm saying is all of these things should be self-evident, but they aren't anymore. So someone has to sit down and write a book about it.
I think that makes a good point. I mean, you're talking about this information that people ought to know, and this is true for a whole host of things. But our modern society has become so atomized. We're so separated from our own families, and this is now we're maybe three generations in where these sorts of things have developed. It sort of began slowly, maybe after World War II, and has picked up steam, especially since the 60s and 70s, as you were pointing out. Now we have multiple generations of people who really don't have the basic foundation of assumed information, like you said, that we can look back for thousands of years that people simply had. They were told or they witnessed it in the interactions with extended family. But now it's something that does need to be put down and explicitly told, because a lot of these people out there, and I mean that applies to all of us to some degree, I think, on some topic, but we don't even know that we don't know. A lot of people have no conception that there is a different way, sort of like the lady who was giving you the tour of your family crypt.
Yes.
She assumes from just her own life that those are antiquated beliefs that people no longer have. That was something quaint people used to believe. But they don't recognize that maybe not only do people still believe that, but maybe she ought to. She doesn't even, it's not something that even occurs to her. So how do we penetrate into, I guess, the psyche of people to get them to even consider that there might be a different path that would lead them to a happier existence?
Well, Alan, very wise things you said, and very good, very well put. I should have put that in my book. Too late now. Okay, there is two paths. One of them is, if people encounter a family that is happy with children, that can help. I remember as a child, we were 3, but my grandfather had 7 children, and whenever we visited families with many children, I was immediately attracted to that. And now most people will first think this is weird, but usually when you spend time with a numerous family, you will feel what I felt then. They have something I don't have. There is something incredible here. There is something that makes you feel at home, because usually numerous families are very open to people who come, and they listen to them. Children are used to being around other people if you're a numerous family. So that's one thing. So the first way out is the experience. The more families try to live that way, the more people will see, oh, this is something I want too. It's also, if you personally never experienced that, if your experience at home perhaps was negative, was bad, but you can let yourself be guided by that desire, by that wish. And that's one of the points I make in my book, is like, it's the greatest thing in the world. You have no idea how great it is, but you have to build it right. You have to build it right from the foundations, and you have to try to get these things right. Then you can build on top. Then it will be the greatest thing. That's one thing. So one thing is meet families, and the other is the book. The book wants to give you a vademecum, a little how-to guide, how to get into it and how to do it when you're there. And I have a sort of secret armor on, plot armor you call it in movies. If I say these crazy, crazy, crazy things, people don't get as angry as like if someone young, someone influential in the media says it, because people say, how can he say, oh, he's a Habsburg. All right. They don't really know how our world. Okay, let's read it. It's quirky. It's quirky. And I hope that people will read it and will see that I'm not a cultural warrior, but I'm just someone sharing what I experienced. And as I said, I pepper it with nice stories from Habsburg history. So it's quirky. And then you read it and then you say, wait a minute, perhaps he has a point here, or perhaps he has a point there. So I hope that my book will, in a very cozy and cheerful way, encourage a few people to go that path. Because the more families live that, the more people will dare to go there. And of course, it helps that I'm ambassador of Hungary to the Holy See. My country is encouraging families to have more children. In Hungary, I don't have the feeling that they're going for 8, 9, or 10 children, but they're ready to go for 3 or 4 children. I know several families who have more children than what is usual in Europe, because they know that the government has their back and that they know the government will help them. So yes, I think all of this will help to build a better society in the next years, but it's a long path, because, as I say, many people will think it's totally crazy what I'm saying.
Let me ask you about the Hungary policies, since you brought it up, because I'm curious about it myself. Hungary seems to be it's the only nation that I know of right now in Europe. Maybe you can enlighten me if there are others, but that's actively pursuing the encouragement of a higher birth rate. I have seen people scoff at this online and be dismissive of it. Well, that's really not going to work, or it's not working. So tell us what is Hungary doing? What are the actual policies? And do you think it's good? I believe that you do think it's good, but do you think it's working? Do you think it will work?
Okay, good questions. Well, first, I will give you a few examples of what kind of support you get in Hungary when you have children. So most of the helps are financial. Tax helps. For instance, when you expect your first child, you can take a loan. It's about $30,000, which is a lot of money in Hungary. And after your third child, you don't pay it back. So if you have 3 children, you will never have to pay that back. And before that, you only pay parts back, and very slowly. And after that, if you have 3, you don't pay it back. That's quite something. You have, if you have 3 children, you basically pay no income tax. If you have 4 children, a woman will never pay taxes again in her life. That's quite something. You have financial aids for buying apartments, you financial aids for building houses. You have financial aid for grandparents looking after their children's children, their grandchildren, if the parents have to work. You have financial aid for family vans. If you take a 7-seater, the state pays a huge part of that. What I think is nearly as important as that is that you have a government that actively promotes family, for instance, through posters in the cities. When you land in Budapest and you get out of the airplane, the first thing you will see is posters stating Hungary family-friendly country. If you see members of the government, ministers, sports people, famous people showing off their family and the fact that they have children, then you may dare yourself to go that path. You're not a crazy loony living in the forests with a shotgun if you have children, but you're something that is acceptable in society. Still, I believe, now this is Eduard Habsburg, the Catholic speaking, I believe it's not enough, because what you really have to do is you need a conversion. I believe that only if you have a lived faith, you will dare to go for higher numbers of children, because you believe that God wants you to have many children. And without faith, I think it's far more difficult to go that path. And the government cannot order people to be devout. This is always a part, and that's why if you ask that, does it work? I can show you statistics that show that the marriages are going up, divorces are going down, births are still going up very slowly. It's a hard knock life, as Annie sings, and abortions are going steep down. There are more families. But again, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. There is an inner conversion that has to follow. If you don't have that, you will only get so far. And Hungary has changed the trend. It's going up, but you can't force this. That's why with my book, I'm trying to encourage people to go far beyond that,
Yeah, I think that makes a good point. I mean, governments can only do so much.
Exactly.
But they can provide incentives, which are valuable. As you said, they can sort of open people's minds to the idea that this actually might, well, why is this being encouraged? Maybe it's something I could participate in. Ultimately, I think, obviously, that I think you're right, that the ultimate problem we have is a spiritual crisis in the West and worldwide, really. Modernity has brought us a spiritual crisis, but I think it's valuable that Hungary or any government sees the problem, and they're really pioneers in this. I think because other states, certainly the U.S., would be hostile to those sorts of ideas. I mean, I think there are people who are talking about it, but if you listen to the current presidential race, sadly, that's not the direction that you really hear discussion going. But it is encouraging, and I think it does frustrate me a little bit when I even see those in the American right, perhaps, who are dismissive of what Hungary is doing and so forth, because this is a crisis that not just the West, but anywhere has really faced before, and we have to be creative in how to deal with it. I think part of the problem is that people don't really recognize it as a crisis yet, and by the time that they do, I think it's going to be too late.
There is, of course, the political spectrum that says it's no problem at all. We just import migrants. They have children, and this is, of course, one of the reasons why Hungary is opposed to that, because we have experienced what it means to import a huge number of Muslim migrants to Hungary. It was the experience of being 150 years under Ottoman rule. The Hungarians say, no, never again. And it's a fact that what we see happening in Western Europe, where you import many migrants from these areas, we see that it just doesn't work. And Hungary and its neighboring countries have next to no Muslim population. The little bit that is there is very well integrated. And integration doesn't seem to be a shining beacon right now in France, in Belgium, in Holland, in Germany. And there's so many problems. But we're still being told this is the solution. Multicultural society, joyful and dancing in the streets will solve our demographic problem. In a way, it might even do it, but it will irrevocably change our culture, our society, our faith, and everything. And that's why Hungary doesn't go this path. But I still believe that you're simply robbing the people in Europe of the greatest joy and the greatest adventures that they can have in their life by simply never giving them a chance to go down that path. Because also in movies, you never see a family with many children, except if something weird. Yeah, most families have 1 to 2 children, and sexual adventures only happen outside of marriage. And so that's what most people think is real. And again, I'm trying to kick through that wall with my book.
You mentioned something, to shift gears just a little bit, but you mentioned something a moment ago about being able to say things as a Habsburg that perhaps other people would be dismissed as saying, that you have this sort of armor on that allows you a wider latitude, because if the mere fact that a Habsburg exists is a shock to a lot of people. And I see that it's interesting because I, of course, see your tweets on Twitter, and I see people respond with surprise very often that a Habsburg has replied to them or has made some point. And perhaps you have given us a little bit of your secret here, that you are leveraging this as a way to perhaps get people to consider things that they might not consider otherwise. Is this your secret plot that you've revealed?
Well, my secret weapon is, of course, my incredible good looks and my charm. But seriously now, Alan, I think my great advantage is that I am wearing many hats at the same time. And whenever somebody is angry with Hungary, he can still accept the Habsburg hat. And if he's angry with Habsburg, he can still accept that I am a nice guy and I like anime. And some people like me because I'm a family man, and because I sometimes post pictures of food, and because I interact with people from the movie world, and I'm someone of many faces. In fact, there was a very, very harsh review by a journalist that you will find now if you Google my name on some literary page, and very harsh. And she is furious about my quirky. That I love American culture, that I can quote Stephen King. Oh, that makes us so angry, because it's, of course, all a part of a right-wing Orban plot that tries to make right-wing thought acceptable in society. But it's not true. It's just me. And one advantage of being a Habsburg is that you are pretty certain of your values. You grow up with them, and passing fads don't really touch you. Doesn't mean you live in a castle far above everybody else, because we don't. We live in a normal world. I interact on Twitter every day. But as Otto said in my, I quoted in my first book, if you don't know where you're coming from, you don't know where you're going, because you don't know where you stand. And we usually know where we stand because we know where we're coming from. And that means that we also know where we're going when we're confronted with a new scene. And that makes me a little bit less easy to topple over by somebody yelling at me, because I just know I'm right,
Well, you always interact with people on Twitter with a wink and a smile. You always I think disarm them unless they are simply unreachable. I think that you present such a warm and friendly demeanor that people don't expect it, and I think it's very effective, and that you bring a lot of happiness there, but as we see, a lot of substance as well, that they might actually learn something, or be faced with some ideas that they might not have considered otherwise, and I think that that's very valuable.
I also believe that you can build a wholesome corner in your part of Twitter. Sorry, X. I will say Twitter. I will say Twitter until Elon throws me out.
Yeah. Well,
I,
he's not allowed to do that. He said, no, he's not going to throw anybody off. So
what I'm saying is, you are creating a positive echo chamber around you, because the way, and for me, it's really easy because it's in my character. It's not even a virtue to behave like that. It's natural to me. And my wife always says, how can you be so nice with these people who say such incredible, stupid and wrong things? I would be so angry. And I said, that's why you are my wife and I'm the diplomat, because I can interact with people who have different opinions from me, and even furious different opinions, because I always, I made a tweet a few weeks ago where I wrote, the blessing and the curse of being a diplomat is that you can always see the other side. And it's so bad because you can't really get really angry about other people's opinions anymore, because you can see, you put yourself in their skin, you try to understand where they come from. And for some people, it's natural. For some, it must be very difficult. If you're someone who's choleric and explosive, but you're still a diplomat, then you'll have to fight every time. For me, it's natural. If somebody comes at me with anger and swinging fists, I usually try to make him laugh and see what happens.
Well, that's good advice. Of course, I mentioned earlier, in the U.S. right now, at the time of this recording, we are in an election season, and there are a lot of hardened opinions, understandably, but the idea that you can interact nicely with someone, or even have someone as a friend who disagrees with you, is something that is quickly is being pushed out of even the idea of consideration. Of course, if someone disagrees with you, they must be your enemy, and I think that's a path to a lot of dangerous consequences, both personally and as a society. It's a real problem, and I honestly think that it's an ideological or totalitarian mindset that leads people to those conclusions, that we need to be able to, as you say, to speak to one another calmly and maybe with humor, and perhaps we won't reach an agreement in the end, but that doesn't mean that we have to be enemies with one another.
When I was still spokesman of a Catholic bishop, I did a podcast with a German atheist and skeptic. Great sense of humor. That's how we found each other. We found each other for our love for cryptozoology and monsters and humor and curiosity. And we had like a series of long conversations about different topics, him from an atheist skeptical point of view, me from a Catholic point of view. And you know, it's always about the balance, not shying back from standing to your points, but not being angry at the other person for seeing it differently. And I believe I am like that now too. I have some kind of friendship, I believe, with Brian Dunning, who does the Skeptoid podcast, and he totally, attacks myths, and of course, sometimes he also goes after religious topics, but he does it with sense of humor, with a great sense of humor, with a great curiosity and openness, and I really like that, and I can interact with him. We write each other often about topics where we can agree upon. I think it's quite a lot already if you can agree on certain things with someone. and with someone who is in a very different spectrum in the Catholic Church, for instance. There are people, you can probably tell by my book, I'm more of the conservative part of the church, and others are not, but I still believe I can be friends with quite a few of them, because we can find common ground, and common ground is more important than what we differ about. That sounds very, very elegant and very United Nations like, but I believe it's true.
So, can I get you on record as believing in the Loch Ness monster and Bigfoot?
I want to believe, as someone famous once said. I can tell you that we did our honeymoon to Scotland, and we went to Loch Ness. Of course, it was because of the beautiful landscape. But I, in fact, in the meanwhile, don't really believe anymore that there is a chance that some sort of huge prehistoric animal group survived in the Loch. Although I know that it has a subterranean connection to the sea, perhaps if we're happy and lucky. But I want to believe that there is a few cryptids around that we still haven't smoked out. I haven't closed the book on Bigfoot. I always believe that all those trail cams and all those cars driving by must at some point have hit on a real Bigfoot. But we believe in an invisible God, so it's not that difficult to imagine that there are some things we still haven't figured out. I would be very happy if we would find a living dinosaur somewhere in the Congo.
Oh, yes, that would be nice. Perhaps we'll have to do a follow-up cryptid episode. That might be interesting. So, Ambassador Habsburg, I appreciate you being on. The new book is out in October, and will be good for anyone to read themselves, but also particularly perhaps to give to their children and other young people to help give them some direction in their lives.
Yes, thank you. And follow me on Twitter or pop in from time to time. And I'm in the lucky situation to still have so few followers that I can still react to people writing to me. So you can interact with the Habsburg if you want to meet me on Twitter. And thank you for listening to this great podcast regularly. Alan is someone who asks very intelligent questions, and I enjoyed this very much.
So do you have other books in the pipeline that we can look forward to in the future?
Well, I suppose I will write one book every 2 years now that I've written. Right now, currently, I haven't. I've written some articles. I'm writing on Twitter, but I'm sure I'm going to have a follow-up after that one. After that one is read by many people, and hopefully, we know what I really want. I want this book to be the cause for at least 100 marriages and at least 800 children. That would be really great.
Well, that is an admirable goal, and I'm sure that it will have a significant impact. Or I assume that there are we have the English release, obviously in the U.S. I assume it will be released in other languages as well.
Well, my last book was released right now in Italian, in Slovenian. It's going to come out in German, in Hungarian. There is a Brazilian Portuguese version. There's a French coming up, a Dutch. So if that book goes well in all those countries, and I'm hopefully it does, then the follow-up will be too. And I hope that I'm going to encourage a few people to be crazy and countercultural. And because the great thing is, if you marry someone, you are building a new kingdom that nobody can interfere from outside. You have this incredible superpower to have children by God and to raise them, to give them your values. The state, nobody can put their wires in your brain there. You're free, and this is such a great gift, so go for it.
Ambassador Eduard Habsburg, I look forward to seeing you on Twitter, and good luck with the new book.
Thank you.